Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And with me, as always, is my trusty counterpart, Tony Tressall. How you doing, Tony?
Good day, everybody. I'm doing well.
Right on. And I think it might be. Well, I think it may. I think it might be the first or second time I've had sort of a family member on, and we were chatting, and I just thought it would be because of the connections with tree thing, it just seemed like a natural fit. So, welcome to Alicia Clark.
Hello. Thank you.
Um, it is quite interesting. I don't we don't do a whole lot in the way of introductions, but I feel somewhat compelled this time, just because it's so unique to me, and I guess somewhat obviously to you, Alicia, I would think. But uh, our listeners probably have not yet heard or know that I was adopted very young, and a few years ago now I found my birth family, and I've connected to many of them, and Alicia is one of those members who I've connected with as my long lost birth family. She's a niece of my a daughter of my half brother. So there it is. And it's kind of cool because I don't have that type of relationship with a lot of people. So and a lot of people don't have that opportunity, and it's been pretty neat to connect with my birth family. So I'll just kick off with that. Well, Alicia, I know that you have the question that's coming, so I want to just get into it because I'm looking forward to your answer. But would you please share with us your first memory of connecting with a tree or trees?
Yeah, so I've always had, my entire life, I've had a deep resonance with trees. But when you ask that question, it really got me sitting and thinking and kind of being with what my first memory is. And the most prevalent memory that I have is actually probably about the age of 4 or 5. And the reason it really sticks out to me is because a baby bird fell from the tree. And I found this baby robin. And I remember being so excited about this baby robin and rushing it into the house, and I got in so much trouble. So it startled me because obviously you're never supposed to scoop a baby bird up out of off the ground. And my little brain didn't recognize that, and I just knew that I needed to save this bird. But it really sticks out in my brain because for quite a while after that, there was a bit of a response within my family around this tree because anytime we went near it, this bird was constantly trying to dive bomb my parents or myself because when we would try to put this bird back in, it was not allowing for us to put this baby bird back in. And so my first memory of this tree was that this little bird fell out and brought this wonderful, exciting moment for me, mixed with a little bit of trauma because I did something that I wasn't supposed to do, and then having to watch the repercussions of this event because everybody was being dive bombed while trying to put this baby bird back to where it needed to go. And so for me, it really opened up this new awareness around the life that lives within trees and the curiosity that my brain hadn't quite come into an awareness of, where there was life living up in these trees that could potentially fall out and create all of this excitement and chaos and disturbance. And it really just started to open my awareness up to looking and seeing that there was life in these trees. Because at that point in time, I loved the trees. I loved the bark. I was a very textile based child. I loved visualizations. I love that bark always looked different. Things felt different. The leaves were different on different trees. But I had never truly connected that these birds would could potentially be falling from the sky for me. And so it brought this new area into my beautiful little brain of what else is in these trees, like what else don't I realize is up there. And so it brought me into more curiosity around looking for the insects that were within them, or the different shapes of the leaves. And so it really opened up this realm that still lives very much through me today because I love nature and I love trees. But that was the very first experience where it made an impactful moment in my development of not just the excitement, but also the chaos that can come from some of these different experiences. And so I think it was an amazing question to really open that up for me to become curious, because we very often don't think about those moments in time of when that intersection happened for us or our first experience happened. And,
Yeah.
when I went back and I reflected on it, it involved, your brother who you haven't met because he passed away when I was so young,
Yeah.
but this man's trying to get this bird back into this tree, and
Yeah.
it was just quite a beautiful experience through all of the chaos of it all.
You made your dad rescue the bird that you rescued.
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I find it interesting because I remember playing with baby birds and finding them, at least once. Like I have memories of it, and they're kind of partially feathered and look kind of weird, and the skin. I wasn't scared of them, and but I also don't remember there being at that time. And I'm now in the '60s, early '70s, when I'm in that age bracket where there was this big fear of, and has it been avian flu, or was that always like that? Like that there was this like baby birds, or was it because of they carried like what was the reason it was bad? Like, do you remember?
Well, because the mother won't accept it back.
Oh,
So
okay, okay.
it was about the baby bird being accepted back. It wasn't about disease or anything like
Okay.
that, because
Okay.
I don't think that I was too concerned. I ate a lot of dirt as a child too. So that wasn't too big of a concern back then. But it was more or less the fact that this mother wouldn't accept the baby back if we touched it.
Right, right, right. Which I remember being reprimanded for that also. For that reason.
Yeah.
That it was like the bird will end up dying because you're not, you don't it won't take it. Now that obviously the next question has to be if, and may or you may not know, because obviously you handled it. My brother handled it. Like it got put back in the nest successfully after the dive bombing and all that. Did it end up being accepted back? Did you notice?
I don't remember it not. And so
Okay.
I feel as though it was accepted back. And I feel as though the backyard was just not allowed to be utilized for a time being because the birds didn't like us anymore.
Right.
We were executed. We were exiled from the backyard. Compliments of this 4 or 5 year old that was just, here to save the world. One baby bird at a time, but I don't remember that anything bad happened. And so I believe that it was accepted. It was just a matter of trying to get it back into the nest after
Right.
the
Right.
occurrences. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned dive bombing. When I worked at the University of Saskatchewan on the tree nursery, I got it in my head, and maybe this is a family trait now that I think about it, but I got it in my head that I wanted to have a pet crow or magpie because I knew they were smart, right? And lo and behold, there was a nest. I saw them nesting because I was there early in the spring, and I knew that I could hear the babies. So I waited until I knew that they were like they were poking over the edge, and I knew they'd be old enough. I figured that they, could survive. So then I stole one, from its family, and all that, and I brought it home, and I had it for about a few weeks, but my roommates were like, "This thing is stinky and loud," and he was quite, but he was already quite smart and observant, and he recognized me, and I was feeding him, but he pooped a lot, and it was nasty, and he was, I could just see he was going to get big, and I chickened out, so to speak, and I brought him back because they hadn't left the nest yet, but ever since then, and I stayed in touch with my friends from that nursery. They said anybody with black hair, and I had black hair at the time, not white like I do now, and anybody that was my size and had black hair, they dive bombed for years afterwards. Like it didn't matter. It wasn't me because I wasn't working there anymore. But anybody that looked like anything like me, they dive bombed forever and ever. They said it was crazy. They remembered that this person had absconded with one of their young. But they did take it back as well, which is interesting. Anyways, thanks for reminding me of that memory.
Well, and actually, I want to include in here, it must be a family thing because I do believe that one of your sisters also had a pet magpie and taught
No
it to
way.
talk. Yeah. And so if I remember stories correctly, one of your sisters had a magpie and taught it to talk, and it was, yeah. And so I think it might run in the family. We're all a little
That's
different when
wild
it
because
comes to
that was what my
collecting
plan was.
birds.
So Tony, I
But you'll
have
have
to ask.
such
I mean, as an arborist, we often end up dealing with nests, and Tony, you got to have a bird story.
Oh, I got a lot. I got a lot of bird stories. There was probably the one of the coolest ones was we were working at a local county park, just general tree work, some deadwood and stuff, and then we'd been there for 3-4 days, and I get this phone call after work, in the evening, and they're like, "Hey, this is the naturalist at the county park. Do you think you could put an owl back in the tree for us?" And I'm like, "Put an owl back in the tree?" And they explained it all. I guess a fledgling great horned owl had come out of the nest, and the owl nests are not very big. They're just kind of like flat bundles of sticks. And before they can fledge and fly, they'll jump around. And they were in some large white pine trees, Pinus strobus. And I guess it landed on a branch that broke, and the owl came out of the tree, and somebody found it. And ironically, there's an owl rescue just south of me, so it went to the owl rescue. And it was fine. I had no problems with it, but it couldn't fly, so it needed to be up in the air, so it wasn't basically like cat food. So I'm like, cool, I'll do this. This is fun. I like owls. Owls are, if I had to pick a spirit animal, I'd pick an owl, right? So I'm like, this is going to be great. So I get out there and I have to set my line, and you could do this at sunset, right? So it's getting dark, and there's a sibling owl up in the neighborhood, so there's another owl watching me, and I don't know where mom owl is. And the naturalist explained to me she's got this owl in a bag. And she's like, okay, and I showed her how. I said, okay, when I get up there, I'll wave down, and you just tie it onto the end of my rope, and I'll pull it up. And she's like, well, here's a little bag of dead mice, stick it around it. We're taking care of this owl. So I'm climbing up this, mostly dark, this spindly ass white pine tree. My line's set at like 75, 80 feet on like it's not unsafe, but it's not a comfortable climb. So I work my way up there, and I signal on, and I pull this bag up with the owl in it and the dead mice. And I'm thinking, like owl, like 6 inches tall, right? I open this bag up. This thing is like 18 inches tall. Like, it's just huge. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I pull this thing out, and I'm like, and he's looking at me like owls look at you, right? And I put him on the branch, and then I just watch his talons just like grip this thing so tight. I could literally hear the wood like as he grabs into it. And then he spreads his big owl wings out, and he starts making this like clicking noise. And I'm like, he's calling for mom. I'm wearing a yellow hard hat. It's all over, right? Like, I'm going to be swarmed by owls. So I tuck in a couple mice, and I'm like, the last thing I said to him was like, buddy, you fall out again, you're on your own, man, because I'm out of here. And then I rappel down the rope, and I guess he was fine, but it was pretty cool. Put an owl back in a tree. He needed to be replanted or replaced. I don't know what that is. And that's just one of many owl stories through the years, but that was a fun one. And what was kind of cool about it is my daughter was probably 4 or 5 at the time. So she and my wife came out with me. So that we'll all put this owl back in the tree together. I don't think she remembers it, but
That's awesome.
Well, that's funny because that was the age that I tried to rescue my little robin, a little less of a risky replacement, but similar nonetheless.
Alicia, you referenced about how connecting to childhood experiences and how they impact us, and bringing conscious memory to them or awareness to them. That do you think that's something that life sometimes hides from us or takes away from us, or is there other ways that it's such a vivid memory. And Tony, your memory, and if your daughter remembers, it's a curious thing, like, and how significant that can be or impact the rest of our life.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm not an arborist, as you are well aware, and now your listening base also is aware. But I have actually been on a little bit of an eat, pray, love journey for the last year and a half, where I have been hanging out with the trees. I dissolved everything that I owned, and I actually went off and I started working with the land and working with the trees and connecting with the natural state, the natural realm. And one of the things that I've recognized is that trees really are, and nature really does hold these keys for us to remember the innocence and to re-immerse ourselves back into the simplicity of what it was to be a child in this world, and those moments of looking up at the trees and feeling so small compared to them and so curious, and bringing us back to those spaces that we, so many of us, so desperately want to remember, but we don't really know how to get to because we have all of these conditions that are placed upon us, and there's all of these traumas or memories or lack of acceptance or these different experiences throughout our lives that cause for us to separate from ourselves. And in turn, we separate from that innocence that we carried in our childhood, where everything really was new and magical and there was opportunity absolutely everywhere. And as we get older, we forget those pieces and we get so busy with the expectations of life and what it means to be a successful human being and to be accomplished and to be a good person. And one of the main things we forget is that we can come back to those spaces through letting ourselves be re-immersed back into the natural state that we are immersed into as children, where everything was magical and everything was interconnected. And we were learning that there was an interconnection, such as, the bird falling out of the tree for me. Before that moment, I hadn't clicked in that there could be a best friend that's waiting to fall on my head and dive bomb my dad. But it was that moment that allowed for me to bridge that understanding. And, we forget where nature is always here to teach us. And you guys as arborists, you have that clear mirror being reflected back to you if you choose to have the awareness of it. But so many normal, quote unquote, people that are in like the regular drive of life, they don't have that natural reconnection that brings them back. And I believe that it is a sacred piece that so many of our souls and our minds and our bodies actually crave to go back to, but we've forgotten how to allow that simplicity to nourish us. And so I don't know if that answers your question at all. I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but
No, it wasn't really a question, and so it was a perfect answer to whatever it was I said. But it made me think about how many people we ask the question, and then maybe our listeners ponder this as they listen. But how many people's first memory of connecting with a tree goes to childhood? It's quite frequent. I would say, what do you think, Tony? As a straw poll here, just quickly taken amongst ourselves, I think 90% of our guests would say.
Yeah, I would say so. And there's also a very, very strong tie to being outside. I mean, of course, our audience is generally arborists, so we might be self-selecting that answer. But the answer might actually be in the question. But still, it is uncanny how those memories go.
Correct. Yeah, when you connect with a tree, you probably are outside.
Well, I mean, but they're early in life, and then they just tend to absorb a lifestyle or adopt a lifestyle that's very outdoors.
Yeah.
Or at least desire. If they don't have the lifestyle that's outdoors, they desire to have one.
Yeah. It gave me pause there to think about what it felt like to when you are, I guess, when you have more innocence, I suppose. I don't know if that's the right word exactly, but or you're less conditioned or less driven. When there's a point in time where you feel compelled to make a decision of what are you going to do with your life, kind of thing, versus no one's bugging you yet about that, and usually you're quite young at that point, right? And there's more time to just ponder the wonder of things, and I mean, I spent tons of time in the shelter belts around the farm, looking at just, it was, trees, shrubs, insects, birds, you name it, was all involved. And it was interesting. So it's I never thought about the difference, like if I was able to look at, just go for a walk and look at things with the eyes of a child. And, do you think that's something that we can train ourselves to do or still can do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind that we're able to do that when we give ourselves permission. But it's a matter of letting ourselves unravel enough. And, nature really does help with that if we choose to immerse ourselves in it. Because for the past year, like when I was traveling all through BC and through Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta, and I was seeing all the different trees and I was seeing all of the different landscapes and the different, everything from coulees to the ocean and the old growth rainforest and all these realms. And they all guided me back to a different aspect of myself. And there was so much wonder and curiosity that took over what was once this controlled, like, okay, have a plan and figure it out and make sure you've got it all right. And it really just allowed for me just to be and to remember what it felt like to be and be curious and be open and aware to what is happening in the environment around me. And
Hmm.
from there, recognizing the different signs or the different feelings that would come up when I would witness something that was taking place in the experience that I was being given, whether it was a bear crossing or whether it was a bird that would fly over top the eagle or whatever it may have been throughout the journey. It would bring me back to this space of connection. And it wasn't just connection to myself, it was connection to, it felt like my childhood and to this longing to live a life where you can just breathe and not feel the pressure of having to always be accomplishing and always
Hmm.
be planning and always be figuring out, and instead allowing for ourselves and myself to come back to the peace of just being with nature. And not everybody has that gift, right? Like you guys are really lucky with the arborist community because you guys are in trees all the time. But for those who don't, it and you start to come back into that space, it really does open up the opportunity to see the world differently if we choose to. But so many times we don't give ourselves permission to do that because it will make us different. And I've been different my whole life, and so I've gotten really good at being weird. Like I'm the girl at the dog park. You come around the corner, and I'm hugging the tree, and I'm chatting with it. And I'm not going to stop when I see you looking at me. I'm going to tell you to grab a tree too. Like, because to me, it's just like, what, let's all be a little weirder. Let's all be a little more creative with nature. Let's just connect into those spaces because, a lot of people are struggling with mental health. A lot of people are struggling with physical illness. I'm trauma integration. That's where I focus on is repatterning cognitive understandings of our belief systems and integrating trauma that's stored in the body. And that's been my realm for 10 years. And when I look at so many people, I can see where, a little bit of time hugging some trees and being uncomfortable in those realms would actually help them find comfort in so much of the discomfort that they're not wanting to acknowledge or face or sit with within themselves. And it's not their fault. It's because society says we need to be on and we need to have it all together all the time. But nature reminds us that it's okay to be a little weird and it's okay to stretch yourself a little bit to become curious of what it is to be in a state of oneness with the natural realm that is here to support us and not just here to give us wood to build homes, but here to
Mm.
give us the roots to come back to ourselves, to come back
Yeah,
to these deeper realms.
there's such an ancient connection, that people do have with trees. The trees and people, civilization, society, and trees. They've been virtually, well, they've been so interconnected, and maybe a little bit less so as technology and building construction has changed. But what hasn't changed is, as you mentioned and touched on, is that ethereal or spiritual aspect of it. And I it's a funny thing with arborists that people that get into it because it's fairly physically demanding as well, which is also an interesting twist to it, I think. But people that find it and get into it, they don't. They tend to either love it or I wouldn't say hate it, but if you're drawn into it, you're almost, it's magnetic. Like you can't really resist it, and you end up finding yourself, like myself and Tony and probably many of our listeners, that you're kind of in it for life. It's a life sentence once the trees have got their roots around you, so to speak, and the branches grab you, and you just, I don't know, Tony, but do you think it's more than just? Is it just that we love the work and it's fun, or is it because of this connection thing that we have as humans with trees and the outdoors? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the easy answer is to say it depends, right? I think everybody comes at their thing a different way, but there is definitely, a connection with that. Like, I'm second generation, so the tree part of it I was involved in before I even knew what I was involved in. So for me, when I came back to arboriculture after trying other things and not being an arborist, it was more about the community of like-minded individuals, right? And the hard work was a part of that. I came back. I always tell people I came back and stayed with arboriculture mostly for the tribe. I like trees. I like working on trees, and I appreciate them a lot more. But I would say the first 2/3 of my career, I really just saw them as objects, right? As things that, I mean, I like them. They're good. They're aesthetically pleasing. I didn't see them the way I see them now, which is, the ability to support whole communities, right? They're a spine or a backbone of a natural system in many. They're individuals in and of themselves, the tree and the plant as it is, but then everything that lives on a tree is so much more. And when you come to the realization that, that even a tree that is fallen and is laying on the forest floor and has been there for a decade, pound for pound, might have more life in it than when it was alive. So they tend to run, they start, what the classic thing was, big old oak trees. We have a lot of big old white oaks around here, and they say, they're about 300-year lifespan. They spend about 100 years growing, 100 years living, 100 years dying. And I would add to that, they probably spend another 300 years returning from whence they came.
Yeah.
So when you start to see that pattern, and that the tree is in your front yard, and it's, you look at it as just a tree, but it's all the other things, what Dr. Shigo called the associates, right? That really give the tree meaning in and of itself, because they tend to be that tie, right? That connection between so many different things in the environment, even if it is just your front yard, or if it's the wilderness, or if whatever, right?
And I think, Tony, being lucky enough to have spent quite a bit of time with Alex or Dr. Shigo, it wasn't just the physical things. He really felt that there was a more, I guess I can use the word spiritual or ethereal connection as well. And and he often, even music, he was really into music and wood instruments, the guitars or reed instruments. Like he played the clarinet, and the vibration that comes from that piece of wood and the vibration through a guitar, and that that's energy transfer. It's resonance, right? And it comes. And he was actually did consulting for Stradivarius on selecting wood for Stradivarius violins. A lot of people may not know that he did that, but he had a real thing for music and vibrations and how trees were part of that. So his associations were wide and far and encompassed not just the physical realm, but into the ethereal as well. I from my times with him, but and thank you for reminding me of that, because I think that the associates parts particularly. That
I think a lot of people see Shigo and Associates, and they assume it's like a law firm, right?
Right.
But that's not what he was talking about. He was talking about all the things that connect to trees. And I think that gets lost a lot of times.
I agree.
I think he was giving us a pretty strong message there, but it gets lost.
Yeah. Well, and we were just chatting, Alicia and I, and I mentioned about the podcast, and you lit up about when I said, well, I have connection. I remember my first memory to trees. And, I thought, well, hey, why not? What a great addition to the podcast to have someone to talk about all their connections. And I know you've got more. So, and, when you hug a tree and you talk about that, what is it for you? Like, do you think, can you describe that connection or what it is that it does for you?
I can, but actually, I really want to touch on something that Tony already was speaking about of the
Okay, okay.
falling, the cycles of the tree, because that's actually something that came into my awareness when I was journeying this summer or this previous summer. Because much of my life, I grew up in central Alberta and I've traveled in that, but the camping and that we would camp out west. So you would see deadfall, but deadfall would always get pulled and it would get burned. So you didn't get to see the same life that was actually being supported by the deadfall. And when I was journeying towards Saskatchewan, I actually went through more of the Drumheller area, so the Badlands area, and I went through all of the coulees, and there was, this mountainous range. And after that location, I dropped down into Cypress Hills. And when I landed in Cypress Hills, I did some hiking there, and that was one of the first places that it landed in my awareness how much life was able to be sustained and the energetic and the power of the forest from the deadfall being allowed to reside there. I could feel how much life was being supported by these trees that, they always say we need to clear it away to keep fires back and to keep, the land clear. But the life that I felt in those areas that I would walk through where you were not allowed to pull any deadfall. You were not allowed to remove anything from these areas. It was all to be protected. And the energy that I could feel in my body and in that connection to the land from not just having the live trees standing, but the trees that were dead and those that were decomposing and those that were sustaining the life, there was a different level of presence that I could feel in that connection to the land. And so I wanted to point that out because listening to Tony speak, it triggered that memory. And I hadn't actually had that memory since the experience because I was journeying by myself with my dog and I really didn't have anyone to talk to other than him, and he doesn't respond. So I don't always get into go to great details on some of those areas, but that experience to be able to acknowledge the level of life that is able to be felt through honoring and allowing for the cycles of decomposition to stay present while the growth is still simultaneously happening within the rest of the forest. It was a very powerful experience. So I want to thank you, Tony, for bringing that up because it definitely brought that back in, and that allows for me now to go into your question, Dwayne, around what I feel when I hug a tree or when I'm in connection with trees. And it's always different. They meet me exactly where I'm at and with what I'm needing. Life can be really challenging. A lot of people have different interpretations of what everybody should be doing, how people should be acting, what, is the right way to go, what is the wrong way to go. And in truth, we come down to it and we really only know within ourselves what is right for us. And that's it. We don't know what's right for anybody else. We don't know
Yeah.
what their truth is and what their soul is here to understand within their own human experience. And, when I meet the trees and when I land in front of them and whether I'm hugging them or whether I'm talking to them or whether I'm just witnessing them, they all bring a different essence of what I'm needing in that moment. And it's not a level of expectation of how they need to show up or how I need to show up. It's just the state of beingness. And through there, I'm able to gain strength and I'm able to gain courage to stand tall and to know that I'm capable of overcoming any limitations that I've placed upon myself because it's not even the world that places them there. It's the expectations that we place upon ourselves that keep us from ever recognizing our ability to grow stronger and taller and wiser in who we are and who we've been and who we are here to blossom into. And the trees remind me of that. And walking through these different forests or the old growth, and I remember just standing there and thanking them for holding space as we remember. We remember the sacredness of what it is to be a human and to have the ability to connect with the ancients. The trees are the ancients and they don't talk, but they are felt and they are the reason we're able to breathe. They give us the oxygen. It's like, and we disconnect from them so much. And when we are allow ourselves to re-immerse and to be curious about what it is that they're going to bring within our life or within our experience of that moment, then we're tapping into so much more than just the human's present experience. I believe that we're bridging the old teachings of how we connected to land and how we felt solace and safety in the world before we had, the heat and we had the all of the luxuries that we have. There was points in time where the tree was that which protected us from the elements and
Mhm.
from the rain, and it
Yep.
gave us what we needed. And so through me hugging trees and me connecting to the different ones, it brings me back to those spaces of sacred reverence for nature, for our journey with nature that has allowed for us to evolve into who we've become as a society. And, there's good things and there's bad things that come from that, right? But it allows for us to go back to those simple states of appreciation and honor, knowing that that tree has spent 100 years preparing for that moment to meet you. And can you recognize the greatness in that? Can you recognize how much growth had to occur within that tree's life and how many storms it's met and how many lives it's held within its branches to meet you there? And can you hold that level of respect for that? Or are we too busy rushing past it to even recognize what it's there to teach us and what it's
Yeah.
there to?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a big part of it is if you're able to slow down enough or give space enough, and not maybe a function of age in life a person is or something like that. But if you can, there's definitely value there and something to be learned, and something you said I found interesting. Can't remember exactly what it was that triggered the thought in me, but like a tree doesn't get like you mentioned about, when we, become feel obligated to pursue a path or have a certain way of being or achieving certain goals. A tree is just itself and grows. And even if the tree, and you said they survive storms, like if a tree does sustain a massive injury, quite devastating, the top blows off and it just is completely, changed. It will continue, it'll perform wound and it will attempt to grow a new leader and it'll continue to on its mission or purpose as a tree. It doesn't say, okay, well, this was so bad, I'm going to try to be something else now. I'm going to change and I'm going to, it just redirects and regroups and deals with what it has had because it doesn't really have a choice, I guess. But what a great example. And I always have thought that it's one of the reasons I like the tag of the Human Forestry podcast, right? Because I think there's so much in a tree that we can see that about ourselves and about life. And if you could live like a tree, maybe we'd all live a little, or I like to try to live like a tree, I should say. I don't want to put it on anybody else, but it's just I find a lot of healing in thinking about that and looking at that myself. It was interesting. There was a guy that he started a company called Treehab, and one of the things they would do is they'd take traumatized people that would have a very difficult time speaking about their trauma and take them into the woods, and they would find a tree that reminded them of themselves, and then they were able to talk about their trauma through the tree. And this tree's like me because it's broken half, or because it has this big hole in it, but yet it's alive around it, or and they were able to actually find healing and a way to discuss their issue without talking about it both themselves personally, but they would direct it through the tree, which I thought was just fascinating. You know,
And I love that because it's creating the container, the proper experience for an individual to then reconnect to nature and speak to nature in that way of talking about the trauma that the tree had actually experienced, but through that becoming the mirror, which allows for the healing to occur, not just for that individual, but even for us as humans to recognize that they are a mirror of us, bringing us back to this nature is here to mirror so much of our experiences. And so I think that is amazing.
well, the thing is they don't. I don't know. I mean, but a tree doesn't get angry or upset that the storm, if that storm hadn't happened, where I'd be today. you know, if that bear hadn't clawed my bark, if that moose hadn't eaten all my buds off for 10 years, I would be like, look at my brother next door, like how big and tall he is. Like, it's just not like trees don't do it. They deal with what they got. And I think I'm starting to wonder if maybe life is kind of like that. Like, in one of our podcasts, when Leo talked about being lucky or unlucky, he said it's just life. And the tree didn't ask for the storm to blow its top off. The tornado went through that section of the woods and it didn't touch the guys beside it, right? It wasn't that they did anything to deserve that. And sometimes I've been trying to learn to remember that for my life. Like, wasn't something done to me. It was just, and even if it was perpetrated by someone else, whatever affected their growth pattern, change them. I don't know, Tony, this is getting philosophical here. You're the philosophical degree. You're the philosophy degree. Sorry. What do you think? Are we getting a little?
I mean, there's a philosophic tenet I personally have that it's always better to be lucky than good every time. Right? So, and then of course, the universe is a screwed up disco ball, as we were talking pre-show. So, it is what it is. Just reflects back what you got. Right?
Yeah, well, I really like the analogy of the reflection part, because I think there is so much of it is a reflection, right? So much that we experience, whether we like to admit it or not, or whether I like to admit it or not, is a reflection of what's really going on in me in so many ways, and that can be a frustrating thing to accept for me, that I actually have something to do with the pain or suffering I'm feeling.
Well, it's, the quote from Anais Nin. I think I got her last name right. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are, right? So, trees got that down, right? Because they see like they don't make an interpretation on the world. They're not to anthropomorphize trees, but that's one of the lessons of trees is they're not making a judgment on the storm or a judgment on where they're growing. Krumholtz doesn't complain because it's short. It is, and there it is, right? So the things that can be learned from that acceptance, right? Or we can get into the cliches if you want. Bloom where you're planted.
Yeah, right.
Make like a tree and leaf. No, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And now, because I'm not in the realm of arborists, but I do pick up information. Now, have I received the proper information that when a tree or some trees are wounded, that other trees will feed the tree through the root system as well? Do they come together and support in that way, or is that something that I've misunderstood throughout the years?
Go ahead, Tony.
It's a bit. Well, I think where it gets misconceived is trees don't react, they just respond. Or they don't respond, they react, right? So trees of a certain species, and most trees as they age, will start to put nutrients and things back into the ground as they start to decline, go through their different life phases. If other trees can pick that up and use it to form wound wood and heal a wood, that's great, but the tree doesn't just send it out there because right. Now, there's still some research going on. I think it can get misconceived, but there is a lot of interconnection that we don't understand, and how it works. And I think that one of the things that I think the lesson you can take from it is that the tree stands there. It's not just alone. It is in a forest, right? But it's not only connected just to other trees. It's connected to all the other living things in its community. So that's just, I think where it gets a bit squishy and people misinterpret is trees they don't hear other trees crying out in pain and send nutrients into the soil. They're sending nutrients into the soil because it's a natural process for them to do that. It's part of their life cycle and the way that the universe works for them.
Yeah.
And other trees, take that up.
And there is, there has been some research that, and it, like any new research, it gets questioned and refuted by other experts because, once you have one expert, there's always another expert that's more of an expert than that expert, right? And it's but Suzanne Simard did research at UBC where she has provided evidence that, cedar fir to birch I believe, anyway, that two species did, and when a tree was in decline or less energy, like when the birch doesn't have leaves, it can't photosynthesize as much. So now it would share resources through photosynthate, which is a direct connection of sharing energy. Now, whether that's specifically for, but it wouldn't necessarily mean it would send more energy to the tree that needs it more. They would all have access to that resource, right? Uh, that our humanness would interpret it as such. But certainly there is, connections, and the funny thing is, some of it's directly connected, where they're connected directly through roots, and they graft, and so like there's a physical, actual joining, but most of it is interconnection through fungi. So
Hmm.
it's carried through the soil through fungal connections through different species and types of fungus, and that's what's really cool because now you got a third party involved, right? And they're all, and the third party is getting a bit benefit from it too. There's energy, and trees exude, they exude glomalin, and it's like a sticky like substance that's got a lot of starches or sugars in it, and that's what things can feed on, right? And other trees can feed on it. That's where the fungi feed on, and then some of these form associates where the fungi actually grow on the root, or they infect or grow in the root, and by doing so, the tree now is able to access certain nutrients through that fungus that it wouldn't ordinarily be able to get, and the fungus gets resources from the tree, basically photosynthate that it needs to survive, and so it's very cooperative. And these are like multitudes of different species and types that occur, right? So it's one of the reasons that there's a propensity that it's advisable to grow trees that are around your area because the fungi that are in the soil are around there too. And it's a big topic, but you know yes, they do share, and they do, and the concept of a mother tree that, well, and they're even suggesting how to deal with insects or different types of infestations. That there's now whether it's how to defend against them or how to integrate them. That's the big question. Because our trees actually saying, look, we need to stop these insects, or are they trying to say we need to work with these insects? That's the big question.
I think a poor analogy would be that trees send out like tree ambulances to help other trees.
Yeah.
A better analogy is just do good in the world,
Yeah.
and it comes back.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
think there's the way you can. It's the way I choose to look at it. Right?
And I
And
got
trees just basically doing good stuff.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
good stuff comes back.
And
And
that's
they and they're
honest.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I
No,
was
no.
just gonna say, and that's that's the that mirroring state that I was seeing, because when you were talking about, the human forestry, and that just takes me in the space of, because I am very much in an energetic realm, which is, um, I I recognize the interconnection between so many different human experiences and so many different things that are happening between people and nature, and generational patterns and all these. And then when we zoom out and we can see where it's like the trees, the forest really isn't that different than the human
No.
state. The only difference is that nature is still just doing what nature does, which is, responding, reacting, growing, dissolving. Like it's not in the same level of
No.
compromise as where the collective is at sometimes in these spaces, right?
I
But
agree.
really, the
And what a great
forestry that we're
example.
surrounding ourselves with, they are those who are nourishing us without even speaking. Their energy
Yeah.
is either going to build us up, or it's going to break us down, right? Or it's going to, there's
Right.
so many different components that are happening that we don't see. And that's where I believe that, the forest and nature, it is so reflective of our human experience, because
Yeah.
we don't see everything that's happening, but there's so many different components that are unfolding below the surface that are supporting the greater system of it all. Yeah, and that is a really neat way because of the fact that you were adopted and you didn't have any connection to your kin, to that where you stemmed from in that same regard, right? And then for us to connect as adults the way that it has, and for you to actually have so many of the different pieces that you've been working through within your own human experience, and for me to go, oh yeah, I know that makes sense because this is a pattern, boom, 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 that runs through our family line. And it allows for us to stop holding so much judgment and shame towards ourselves of like, why am I like this? And why haven't I figured this out yet? Or what's my problem? When in truth, we
Sorry, Dwayne.
that's okay. We
Just
lost
keep.
Dwayne.
He'll be back. Yeah,
But
I don't
in
know, some sort of. You're good.
I'm good to keep talking.
Yeah, just keep going.
Yeah,
He'll get back in.
but yeah, in truth, it comes down to these spaces where so much of it we're storing in our energetic field or in our physical bodies, and we don't have to have the connection or the experiences with those specific individuals or that specific line in order to still be asked to hold the space within ourselves for that which we didn't break, but is it really broken in the first place? Or is it just needing to be reintegrated into the family line or into the family species so that it can actually become wisdom and beneficial for, the new growth that is to come versus this weight of feeling as though we have done something wrong, which is why we need to fix all of our problems and hold less compassion and empathy towards the experiences that we're being given to navigate. And so that correlation between the two, it really does run so deep. And unfortunately, you missed that, Dwayne. You popped off, but
Yeah, yeah, it's
there will
okay.
be a replay, I'm sure.
It's just evidence that I have to listen to it, and for whatever reason, there's one of those. Oh, everything happens for a reason. I don't know why. Maybe we're overloading the connection or something here. I don't. It's interesting. I think so.
Interesting, yeah, yeah, but
I'm
no.
sure it was cool.
Well, yeah, it was
Tony,
just, it
what do
was,
you ever? Tony, did you have a response to it?
No, I think Alicia said it very succinctly and accurately, and it kind of reflects in trees and how things are passed down, right? Like you look at a big old oak tree grown in the woods, right, and it's 150, 200 years old. Like its parent probably didn't grow up far from there. Like at least it didn't.
Right,
Of
right.
course, can be transplanted and nature can do its things. But generally speaking, that tree's family and its legacy's been there for a long time, and it shares those certain traits. And that's what
Well, and
Alicia, I
getting
believe,
back
was
to
referring to.
in that old tree decomposing, the 400 years ago or 500 years ago trees from that tree's lineage are in the soil and provide they're part of it in a way energetically for sure. Like it's interesting, yeah. I never. Maybe all this transplanting trees is like they got these trees lost from home. They're like like adopted like me.
well, and that's the funniest part too, right? Because we're both transplanted trees. Like I was created in Saskatchewan. You were created in Saskatchewan. I was
Yeah,
born in
yeah,
Manitoba, but yet here we ended up actually living 40 minutes from one another in Alberta,
yeah.
and just had this instant connection where it was just resonance, and in a way that I hadn't actually experienced with much of my family before. And I mentioned that to you, and so I love that these trees can be separated, these people can be separated, they can be born in different places, there can be a 40-year gap in between, when one came in and the other one, like there's all
Yeah.
of these different components. There's missing components of like, well, you're not you're interconnected to my dad, and there's trauma because of the dad and all these realms, but yet you come in and together we create this synergy that just actually binds and creates a state of acceptance and understanding and reverence for one another's journey without all of the gunk in between. And it's a fascinating thing because you're just another person that was living 40 minutes from me, but the connection is profound in a way that I would never have fathomed, right? And so it's a beautiful when we think about that transplantation that, well, sometimes we're even transplanted into places and then we're next to kin that we don't even realize are going to be there to support the wholeness of us coming into understanding ourselves and our
Yeah.
human experience and what that means. And, to allow for us to recognize the opportunity that is always sitting in our realities if we choose to become aware of the
Mm.
intersections of it all. So it's
Yeah.
very cool.
Being open to it or willing to observe it too, right? Like you have to have a space for it, and sometimes you're not in a place to be able to accept that or handle that, and we're all in different stages. But I feel very lucky and blessed, or it's just been really cool to, the whole reconnecting or connecting, not even reconnecting, but connecting with my birth family, and you know, you're a great storyteller, and I know you had so many experiences on your journey last summer and through the fall, but one in particular that I don't know if you're willing to share it, but I find it such a fascinating story of it, and I didn't even know the island existed in the. And I don't know if it's in the middle of Lake Winnipeg or where exactly it is, but I think it's just such a cool story. And I don't know if you'd and I don't know, maybe it ties in, but for some reason it popped into my head while we've been talking here.
Yeah, yeah. So that is actually, it is an amazing story. So the entire journey that I did last year, I didn't have a rhyme or reason. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, but I was actually being guided to go to different grid lines through
Right.
astrocartography. And so most people have never heard of it. I hadn't either, but I was guided to learn to understand it. And I knew that there was a Pluto line, Pluto the planet. My Pluto line actually ran through Manitoba, and I was being guided to drive to Manitoba. And so I drove all the way. And the funny thing is that the weather was beautiful. It was like plus 40 that week, and it was just stunning weather. And as soon as I got to Winnipeg Lake, there was the wildest storm that blew in, and it didn't stop the entire time I was there. But I didn't know why I was being guided there, but I knew I needed to go to Winnipeg Lake. And so I just kept on driving, and I ended up, I believe it was called Highway 8, and it ended up ending. It came to a dead end of the road, and that was as far as you could go. And I got to this space and I went, okay, well, why am I here? Like, we've just driven like 14 hours now. Like, why are we here at this lake? Like, the weather was nice. Now it's a storm. And when I arrived there, there was a climbing tower, like an outlook tower. And so I looked at Apollo and I said, well, there's only one way to go, and we're going up, I guess. So we climbed this tower, and I got to the top, and I'm wondering, like, why am I here? Like, why have I driven to the end of the, like, none of this makes sense. I still hadn't figured it out. And when I got to the top, there was a sign right at the top, and it said Black Island, and it said the sacred island of Cree teachings. So it's a traditional Cree island that was utilized by the Cree people for ceremony, for hunting, for many, many years. But the only way to be able to get into it is to actually take a private charter boat. And so at first I thought, oh, Black Island, that's really got my attention, but I didn't really know how to get a chartered boat. There was no boats around me. All I found was this tower, right? So when I came down, I ended up going into the marina area and asking them. And for the next 3 days, we spent each day chatting at different points to figure out if we were going to be able to get across the water to this island, because we had to wait for a break in the weather because it was so bad. This storm kicked up. It was like we were on the ocean. Like, it was crashing and waving, and with the all the commercial fishing, it's very dangerous on Winnipeg Lake. And so we'd finally caught a moment where we thought that we could get through. And so this chartered boat took me across, and we made it. And it just, the storm broke long enough for us to basically be there for an hour and a half. And I got onto this island and I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing on this island either. I just knew that I was supposed to be there. And I was guided when I saw two eagles sitting on top of this tree that it was a dead looking tree. There was no leaves. There was all the other trees had leaves, but this one was barren. It had nothing. And the two were sitting on top, and I knew immediately that though that's where I was to go. And so we went trucking through to this dead tree that was surrounded by all this green foliage and this white, beautiful sand that was just so fine. And I was guided to sit down and I did ceremony under this dead tree and the two eagles flew off and it was such a powerful knowingness that I didn't know the purpose of why I needed to be there, but I knew that my feet needed to touch this island, that those birds, those eagles were guiding me to this tree that you would never sit to think to sit underneath this tree and do a ceremony because it looked dead. Like there was nothing to it. It was so tall, it stood above everybody else, but he had nothing to offer but the branches for the eagles to sit on, for me to be guided to this tree. And when I sat down below it, it had all of the foliage around it. Everything was alive below it. But the anchor point that called me in was that which was dead in order for me to see the eagle sitting there and to be guided. And so it was like that which looks like it should be removed. It's not a part of the living process of what is taking place there. It very much was. It was the anchor point that guided me to the space where I was to sit and do this ceremony. And when I left, when we went across, that storm stopped. And when I left Winnipeg, it went back to being beautiful. So I don't know what happened in that experience, but it was like when I got called into Winnipeg, there was a storm and it led me to a barren tree with two eagles where I was to do ceremony. And when I left, the sun returned and the winds calmed and the water calmed. And I still to this day do not fully grasp what took place in that experience, but I do know that it was very important. It was very sacred because for whatever reason, I was taken to Manitoba to be born, even though I was from Saskatchewan. Like I had never even been to Manitoba before that. And so I knew that I was being called back to this space that my roots originally touched from. And with my Indigenous background, with my Métis, my roots stem from Manitoba. And although my
Hmm.
human mind could not understand the importance of why this mattered and why I needed to pay $250 and talk to some dude 3 times a day for 3 days to try and find a way to get across to this island that I didn't even know why I needed to go, my spirit knew that there was something that was very sacred that was to take place and that I was to trust it. And I think that that's a big part of what I gain and I learn and I experience from nature is nature doesn't need to understand. The trees don't need to understand the purpose of what they're doing. They just do it. And that's
Right.
something that we've forgotten as humans. We always need to have an understanding of why. Well, what's the reason for it? What's the purpose? Well, sometimes the purpose we're not able to comprehend because it's far too big for the
Yeah.
simplicity of what we're able to define within our mind.
Yeah.
We would ruin it. So we're asked to just be and to trust what is moving through us and to trust the dead tree is leading us to the new growth below it. Right? It's like there's so much where we are being given the opportunity to remember what it is to live in a co-creative nature with the natural world around us. But
Hmm.
can we slow down and can we honor our primordial being and our intuitive nature and our curiosity to not have to figure it all out and instead just be in the pure presence of what we're being gifted to experience in the moment. And that's what nature, that's what the trees, that's what the fallen birds, that's what all of it brings me back to is how is this supporting me and remembering that I am not separate from all these pieces that my brain and my physicality tell me is separate from me,
Right.
but it's not.
No. Well, and what a great example of how a tree continues to provide. It's quite often interesting. I you observe birds of prey particularly, but other birds too. They like to sit in the tall dead treetops. I don't know if they got better view. There's no canopy below them, right? So they can see everything. I mean, that's my human brain thinking, but my point is this dead tall tree is so providing such a valuable function to these eagles, right? Because they're probably hunting, and there's also the symbol of them being there as a guide, which has always been a deep traditional thing with First Nations because they're the highest flying of birds, right? They fly the highest, so they carry your prayers to the Creator, and it's one of the reasons they're sacred, among others. But it's it's pretty cool. Yeah.
And
And
I
you know
love that
that.
you.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I love that you brought that story up for me to reflect on because I haven't reflected on it in quite some time. And yesterday when I was walking at the dog park, it actually caught my attention to look up and at the very top of it was some sort of a pine tree or spruce tree or something. I'm sorry, I don't know my trees
It's
that
okay.
great. I know them as friends, not so much as their species. But I thought it was amazing that I recognized that this tiny little bird was at the very top, like he was sitting on the very top of that branch. And he was looking out, and I actually pointed out to two women that were passing by because I was like, it's just this tiny little bird, but he's like, I am the king of the forest right now. Like I'm choosing this perspective. And as you were, because you brought up this reminder around the eagles, it just took me where I'm like, oh, that's interesting that the eagle sat on the dead tree, right? The led
Yep.
me to that space. And yesterday, this tiny little bird led for me to witness it sitting on top of the world on its foliage and on, the tree that is still alive and that is growing. And so it's a cute little intersection of those two experiences because I was really taken by this little bird and I actually took 3 pictures of it because I thought, look at you go, buddy. I see you. I see you. Nobody else would notice, but I see what you're doing up there. You're having a great time.
Well, that the whole bird thing and the other spe- animals as well, but birds for sure. That trees are their home. There's certainly quite a number of, but birds in particular, and I think almost exclusively, if I'm not mistaken. I know there must be some birds that don't live in trees, but I think by and large, most birds live in trees or shrubs or something like that. It's their homes, right? Yeah, and then other critters too. I've heard that in the cavities that form in trees, which are usually a result of some sort of injury, or storm damage or something. And then a cavity's formed because wound forms around it, and even decay will be in that small section. And then a small bird might make that a home. And then as that gets larger and ages and becomes too big of an opening, the bird's now not safe in there anymore. So then it'll move, and a larger bird will move in, and now it's habitat for a different animal of a different size that the hole's big enough for it but small enough that predators can't access it, so it's a protectionary structure, right? And then as that grows and moves on, now maybe a weasel moves in, or a raccoon, or it's something bigger yet, right? At some point though, when nothing's living in it, it's something I often tell people. If nothing's living in the canopy anymore, in the cavity anymore, sorry, then it's probably soon to fail because everyone knows it's not safe to live in there anymore. When the animals have moved out, the squirrels said, "No, no, we're not living here." And because I don't know, Tony, how often have you seen a storm tree with habit, like where a family is in it, other than a hurricane maybe. They normally
Yeah,
don't. Yeah.
yeah, not for like you see it with catastrophic
Right.
storms where
Right.
like we have catastrophic failure, whole tree failure, or lightning, right? Um, but which is just bad luck.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, you're right. You don't rarely do you see just like a a stem fail or something and there be a nest within it because it's moving, or maybe animals are like, yeah, that's a low rent district, man. I ain't living there.
Yeah, I can't help but think I've been fascinated. I've observed it many times, and I've always been like, man, nothing's lived in here for a couple years. It's probably near to fail. The things that as much as there's things we don't know and ponderings and spirituality, there is just the simple fact of living. You got to be safe and you got to have food and shelter too, right? In order to be able to dream and think.
Hierarchy of needs.
Yes, yes, and how that shifts as you age. You're talking about is it what's the Maslow? Is that
Maslow, yeah.
yeah? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, yeah, interesting.
Yep. If you don't have food on the table and a roof over your head, it's hard to have grand visions of life, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Right?
Yeah,
It just is.
yeah, and I think it's something that that maybe it's easy to take for granted. Like you flick the switch and the light goes on. You turn the tap and you've got hot water. You open the fridge and you got food. You don't have food, you go to the store. Like when you spend time in the woods, like living, whether I was ice fishing a couple weeks ago. We were in a very remote area, and we were lucky enough to have a cabin and a generator, but there was no other real amenities out there, right? And there's no Starlink even. There's nothing. And if you weren't harvesting food and cutting wood, you would not eat and not be warm, and it would become very uncomfortable. And and I think it's good every once in a while to become in touch with that. To come in touch with. Well, Alicia, your winter experience there. You had a heated wood cabin with no power,
Yeah,
right?
off-grid cabin, yeah. And honestly, that experience, it changed me. Like, there was parts that was uncomfortable, like having to get up at night to make sure that your fire stays stocked because it gets cold, especially when it's minus 30 and you're in Alberta. And yeah, but yeah, having to, pull the water from the river and, collect your wood and, trust in your ability to be able to work with nature, and that you're able to give yourself what you need. And I didn't have power, and so as soon as the sun went down, I was lit by candlelight. And there was a lot of deep healing that took place within me from that experience of going back to a balance and a rhythmic state with nature, where when the sun came up, I had light, and when the sun went down, I had candlelight. And if I
Right.
didn't feel like getting my wood that day, well, I was going to be really freaking cold. And I was going to have a really angry pit bull glaring at me because he is not built for that. Like, it, it was, but at the same time, I would spend my time walking out and creating connection with the wild horses and learning how to
Right, right.
stabilize my energy and build trust with them so that they would come to me, so that they would no longer see me as a threat, and they would welcome me into their environment and into their space. And one of the last times I was out there, I was given the opportunity to have one of the foals from last year come within 4 feet of me and not be scared. And it took me coming to this very still, balanced, slow state of honoring winter and what that means when you are living in such a way where you are mindful of the resources that you have, of your energy, of if you're expelling energy that you don't need to, that needs to go into a different area, right? There was a lot of awareness that came around that level of simplicity and the appreciation that I actually had for needing to do the work to get what I needed in order to survive. It created a different level of appreciation for the warmth when I couldn't just hit the button and I had to turn it up. And instead, I had to make sure that the wood was cut But then that wood, it would heat my food and it would warm my bones in a way that normal heat from, a furnace, it doesn't do it the same way. Like the coziness of the fire heat in the cabin, the stars in the dark sky, the moon glowing so bright, the hoarfrost covering everything and turning it into a mystical, magical wonderland. I didn't have a
Yeah.
TV, but I didn't need a TV because nature was so miraculous to witness and to watch how it flowed, how she moved, how the horses would move, like when they would come in, when they wouldn't come in. So much wisdom was found from being in a state of having nothing to distract me. So
Yeah.
much appreciation came from having to work for what I needed in order to survive. A respect for the wood, an appreciation for it in a way that I never would have had before because I've never been put in a place where I had to find a way to stay warm and find a resource that was going to be available to me through nature and through working with her and finding the areas that would provide the heat that I needed, right? And it was uncomfortable. Like, I think I made a lot of people very uncomfortable with this last year because nobody wants to see anybody just walk away from everything and test their limits, right? It can create a lot of uncomfortability in others. But it really brought me into this deep state of respect and honor for so much more than I possibly could have ever touched into if I would have stayed in the comfort of my 4 bedroom, 4 bathroom townhouse with the custom art and too many clothes that I never ever wore and I never went through, and so many cosmetics that I didn't even use, and all this stuff just took up all this space, and I loved it and it was beautiful. But it was keeping me from ever truly appreciating some of these very simplistic states that most people will never ever choose to put themselves into. And I'm grateful that I had the courage to do it because nature taught me so much. And yeah, the wood burning stove is always going to be a necessary thing, I think, in my world because I love that form of heat now. It's different.
Yeah. It was a
It's
cool spot.
different.
I appreciated the times I went and visited you there. And Tony, you get to experience some of that with your cabin that you have, and you make time for that sort of thing yourself with the hunting and stuff too.
Yeah, I have found that the less I do tree work, the more, the less I'm climbing trees and in trees on a regular basis, the more I need it actually. Because the work had kind of, what was my work had also kind of substituted for that time in nature. But now, I do make time for it. Some of it's just plain, someone's got to take care of the place or the squirrels will take it over. um, but some of it is just being out there and watching the river flow by.
Yeah, because you're by a river, right? That
Hmm.
your cabin. Yeah, yeah. But you have power,
And
though.
Yeah, it's a house. It's not an off-grid thing at all.
But
well, if you
still,
want to go out, if you want to test it out, test the off-grid waters out. I know the place. No, but I think that it's amazing, Tony, because even you saying like now that you're not climbing the trees and you're not up there as much, you recognize where you need it. It's like, and that's one of those pieces as well where we take things for granted. We don't realize how much nature truly affects us, and when we're continually given the opportunity to be climbing them, they're just naturally clearing us and grounding us and bringing us into this state of alignment within ourselves of where we're at in those moments. And once we remove that invisible force that we don't realize is carrying such an important factor for our emotional, mental, and spiritual health, all of it, then we start to recognize where that craving comes in of like, oh, like I need this. And I didn't even realize how much it was giving to me. And that helps us again look at ourselves as, this human forestry of recognizing where there's a lot of unseen forces that are building us or supporting us that we don't realize until they're removed. And once they're removed, then we need to find ways to be able to weave back in and bring those elements back into our lives, because it's a necessary medicine that we didn't even know we were taking, that's been feeding our soul. And once it's gone or it's removed, then we crave that. We crave that to come back in, because we don't have to ask it to do it. It just does it, because that's what nature does. That's what we do, right?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, if you need some holistic healing, you need to be a climbing arborist.
Yeah.
I got paid to do that stuff every day.
Well, you know, we've started a tradition in our podcast this year, and I better not say it every episode or it'll sound redundant. But we read from this is one of Dr. Shigo's books. You know, he wrote several books. This was more of a book he wrote in you know what it is. It isn't specific to the discipline of trees. It's called Tree Pithy Points, and the pith is the center of a tree. Okay, the very center of a tree is the pith, and these are tree pithy points, and they're brief messages on tree biology, tree care, and philosophy. So they're there, and there's 950 of them. And we've been asking our guests as kind of a wind up to our conversation, to stimulate some final words, is to pick a number, which I know is always. I'm curious how you're going to go about doing this, knowing you, but number between 1 and 950, which is crazy range.
777.
Wow, look at that, Tony! She just nails it.
Just right there, all sevens.
Here we go.
Rolling a slot machine.
This is interesting. So this is Tree Pithy Point, number 777. Remember the dot connecting games when you were a child? Some people must connect all the dots before they see the pictures, while others connect only a few.
That
Tree
is a
Pithy Point.
perfect. That is
Isn't it?
perfect.
I always, whenever we did this, I always get a little goosebumpy, because I wonder, like, so many of them have been so appropriate for the conversation. It's just uncanny. And I was wondering, and I was trying not to think about it because I didn't want to jinx it with you, but I thought, I wonder what she'll pick. And isn't that a fascinating pithy point, number 777? Remember the dot connecting games when you were a child. Some people must connect all the dots before they see the picture, while others connect only a few.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's a perfect wrap up with all of it, even down to bringing up about the child putting
Yeah.
together the dots, right? It's like that level of sweetness and simplicity, and yeah, how we are all different and we all perceive things differently. We're all experiencing, like, the way that we put the image together, it's unique to us. We don't have to be the same as everyone else, just like the trees don't have to be the same as all the other trees. Like, each is
Right.
carrying our own source and our own system, and
Yeah.
honoring the differences and celebrating them rather than devising and creating separation. It's such a beautiful gift. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dr. Shigo, for this book. It's a cool book. What do you think, Tony? The connecting dot analogy.
Oh yeah, I like it. It does fit well. It's just Dr. Shigo's energy coming into the podcast, as it does so many times, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's what's so great about books. It's the old, like Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, right? Like he got shipwrecked. He was a merchant. He got shipwrecked in ancient Greece, and he went to the Oracle of Delphi. And the Oracle of Delphi told him that he should have conversations with dead people. And he was mystified for quite a while until he realized that sometimes when you read books, you're having conversations with dead people.
Ah. Interesting. There is something about books, that's for sure. There it is, Alicia. Maybe there's a prophecy. There's a book in your future.
Well, honestly, and I think it's interesting because Tony just talked about Delphi, and all of these pieces have been actually very much in my awareness for a little while. So for him to wrap up the conversation as well with those pieces, I think that that's even just the cherry on top of my cake. And I have a feeling yoga practice is going to be deep today because you've opened up a whole new state of welcoming me into your Arbor Canada,
Yeah.
arborist, yeah, just this realm, right? And this opportunity and this experience, because this is the first podcast I've ever done, and it was
Well, I
fun.
want to thank you for being brave enough. I know it's always a little nerve wracking to do it, and I want to thank you for joining us. And I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And thank you very much.
I definitely did. Yeah, it was incredible, and thank you. Thank you for being open to having somebody who's a little bit different on the show, right? Because I'm not your typical type of a person that's like, let's talk trees, and instead I'm like, hey, let's talk trees and the magic. I'm in that world, but not that world. It's like I bring my own little flair, and so
Yeah,
it's really nice to bridge the two worlds and to create unity
it is.
rather than division, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great, and I hope our listeners enjoyed as much as I have.